It started with a breath. Hot, shallow, almost trembling, the kind of breath that fills a quiet room like thunder. The air inside the old hearing chamber of the Capitol was dry, the kind that clung to your throat and made every word feel heavier. Outside Washington, D.C., baked under the sticky heat of late July, but inside, the temperature was dropping fast, not from the air conditioning, but from the sheer chill passing between two human beings seated across a long mahogany table. Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez leaned back slightly in her chair, lips curled with the hint of a smirk. Her fingers rested on the desk in front of her, tapping an almost imperceptible rhythm, like the ticking of a clock. Senator John Neely Kennedy sat opposite her, hunched forward just enough to show engagement, but with the stiff spine of a man who'd been carved out of old Southern stone. His weathered face, etched by years of long roads and long nights in Louisiana politics, didn't twitch. But behind his clear, lined eyes, something flickered. It began, innocently enough, a heated exchange during a committee hearing on rural economic recovery. AOC had pushed back on an outdated policy, Kennedy defended. Tensions escalated, but then, like flint striking steel, a single comment changed everything. "I'm sorry, Senator," she said, her voice measured, but unmistakably laced with derision. "Is this the part where you tell us about how hard things were growing up barefoot in the Louisiana mud? Because I can't keep a straight face when you act like a Depression-era ghost who wandered into the 21st century. Laughter rippled through the room. Mostly staffers, young aides, people who hadn't seen Kennedy in his youth, who didn't know the weight that history had on his shoulders. Kennedy didn't speak for a moment. He didn't even blink. He simply looked at her, really looked, like he was measuring her. Then, softly, in a voice that dropped like a stone into still water, he said, 3 seconds. She blinked. "What? You've got 3 seconds to apologize," he said. "Not to me, but to the boy I used to be." Time slowed. The laughter died instantly. The chamber hushed like a courtroom awaiting a verdict. And then, without waiting for permission, Kennedy began to speak. Not to attack, but to reveal. "I was 9 years old when I first realized we were poor," he said. His accent, always thick with southern molasses, grew stronger, deeper. "We didn't say we were. My mama just used to tell me, John, poor's not a curse word, it's a season. We lived in a two-room house, barely stood upright after every storm. My daddy came back from Korea with half his spirit and a pocket full of nothing. He tried everything, farmhand, school bus driver, gravedigger. And when we couldn't afford the gas for the heater, we burned old fence posts just to keep the chill off the baby's feet." Every word hit like gravel on dry skin. "And when the schools finally desegregated, and my best friend Elijah, a black boy with a laugh that could make you forget your troubles, sat beside me in class, the town turned cold. My uncle stopped speaking to us. But I stayed sitting with Elijah. He taught me calculus before the teachers could. I taught him to fish. And when his daddy got killed by a drunk deputy on a back road, I held his hand at the funeral. We were boys, and we had to be men before we were ready." AOC sat frozen, her smile long gone. "I didn't get here by climbing on anyone's back. I got here because my mama worked herself to the bone, because Elijah made me believe in books, and because a janitor named Mr. DeWitt let me sleep in the chemistry lab during my first year at LSU or when I didn't have enough for housing. That wasn't the story the media told. That wasn't the soundbite. But this wasn't for the cameras. This was a reckoning. But I never laugh at someone's past," Kennedy continued. "Because I remember mine. Every scraped knee, every stretch of hunger, every prayer whispered in the dark. So no, Congresswoman, I won't accept your laughter at the life I came from. Not when it taught me the very values this country's supposed to stand for." The silence was unbearable. Even the aides looked away, unsure if they'd witnessed something sacred or shameful. And it was there in that stillness that AOC's posture changed. She leaned forward, her brows tight with a mix of shock and reflection. She began. "I didn't know." "No, you didn't," Kennedy replied, "but now you do." That moment didn't go viral, Not immediately. The cameras caught it, sure, but it was the aides. The journalists in the back row, the woman cleaning the hallway outside, who first passed the story around. AOC didn't storm out. Kennedy didn't grandstand. But something between them shifted. Later that day, AOC stood outside in the hallway, her phone buzzing non-stop. She stared out the window for a long moment before speaking to her chief of staff. "I've been so busy proving I belong here," she said quietly, "that I forgot why I wanted to come in the first place." "What do you mean?" "I came to fight for people like my dad, like Kennedy's mama, the people who never had a voice in the room. I just forgot there's more than one kind of struggle." Meanwhile, in his office, Kennedy sat alone with an old photograph in his hand, him and Elijah, 10 years old, grinning through missing teeth, fishing poles slung over their shoulders. He smiled sadly and whispered, "You'd have liked her, Elijah, she's got fire." 2 weeks passed. The world moved on. The hearings continued. But quietly, under the radar, something else began to happen. Kennedy and AOC started meeting privately off the record once a week. The staff didn't understand it at first. They weren't working on the same bills. They didn't agree on half the fundamentals. But what they did share was a rare understanding that pain could forge resilience, that respect didn't require agreement, and that the American story had more than one author. One of those meetings led to something unexpected, a bipartisan effort to expand rural broadband access in underserved areas. Another led to a joint scholarship program for first-generation college students. The headlines didn't blare it. The cynics didn't believe it. But it happened. And yet, beneath the politics, another story unfolded. One of healing. For Kennedy, it was coming to terms with a lifetime spent wearing armor, finally allowing space for vulnerability. For AOC, it was rediscovering humility, not as weakness, but as strength, the kind that bridges worlds. One evening, months later, they spoke together at a town hall in Jackson, Mississippi. The auditorium was packed. Farmers, students, factory workers. And when AOC introduced Kennedy, she didn't mention his title. She just said, "This is a man whose story reminded me that struggle doesn't wear one face." Kennedy stood, adjusting his old tie, and nodded to her. "And this is a woman whose passion reminded me that fire isn't just for burning. It's for lighting the way forward." The crowd rose, not for politics, but for truth. In the end, the moment she laughed and he demanded an apology wasn't the real story. The story was what came after. Two people from different worlds choosing not to be enemies, not to retreat into safe corners of self-righteousness, but to walk awkwardly, uncertainly, toward understanding. Because sometimes, the real courage isn't in the clash, it's in the conversation that follows. And maybe, just maybe, that's where America finds itself again.